Good evening. Venerable Chodron is still in Asia, and so we'll continue with our reviews. Tonight, reviewing Chapter 5, Sangha, the monastic community. And so we can start with our prayers, imagining the Buddha and the refuge field and the space in front.
I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhist, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhist, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhist, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger.
And tonight we're going to review the monastic Sangha and the importance of the Sangha in the world. And in one of the sections, His Holiness and Venerable Chodron advise us to reflect on some of the verses that we chant during ordinations. And so one of those verses is, transmigrating in the three realms, one is not able to sever attachment. Give up attachment and enter nirvana. That is the true way to repay kindness. And so here we are, transmigrating in the three realms. We've been doing this since beginningless time. And if we could have severed our attachment by now, we wouldn't be in samsara. This is our challenge. We are living in this situation that we are trying to be free from. And severing attachment and its root of ignorance requires cultivating the three higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And there are very few people in the world who really prioritize the practice of ethical conduct. And people who take monastic and lay precepts are even fewer. And those who keep them well are still even fewer. So it's quite rare and special that we have these teachings and this emphasis from our teachers to really put our focus on ethical conduct. Give up attachment and enter nirvana. This is the way to repay kindness. This reminds us that the true repayment of kindness to our parents, relatives, friends, fellow citizens of the world, and all sentient beings is to dedicate our life to Dharma practice. We are aiming to benefit others right now as we engage in proper ethical conduct and act in ways that are respectful and kind, considerate, and helpful. And we work towards creating the causes for liberation and full awakening, where we can really be of the most benefit to them. The heart of the Dharma is nonviolence, and the foundation for nonviolence is ethical conduct. Ethical conduct is the basis of liberation and full awakening. So take a moment to generate bodhicitta as your motivation for listening to the talk tonight, focused on monastic ethical discipline. So we're continuing to review the higher training in ethics of Volume 4 in the Library of Wisdom and Compassion. This is the last chapter in the higher training of ethics before we move on to concentration. Next slide. And so the parts of the chapter that we'll focus on tonight is the value of the monastic community, the intent and purpose of monastic life, maintaining the purity of the Sangha, advice for monastics, and the joy of monastic discipline. Next slide. So in the value of the monastic community, Venerable Chodron took some time to really unpack this paragraph here. In our day and age, Sangha living together at monasteries provides an example of a community intent on living ethically. Not conforming to the consumer culture, they show that it's possible to be happy and content with a simple lifestyle and few possessions. And she clarified numerous times while she was teaching this chapter that Sangha refers to a group of monastics. And this is often misused in the West, where it's more referred to a group of people at the Dharma Center, a group of practitioners. And the fourfold assembly are monastics and lay disciples. The Buddha indicated the importance of the Sangha. He set up the Sangha, and the monastics have been the ones who historically have preserved the Buddha's teachings and passed on the Buddha's teachings. And we do this by living together in a harmonious community. We live simply, or when we are practicing well, we are living simply. And a monastery where monastics live is a place that uplifts and inspires people. They are the traditional center of Buddhist culture, teachings, and practice. And one reason that monasteries are valued is because the monastics practice ethical discipline. And when people are studying and practicing sincerely together, others feel uplifted and know there is a place where they can also come and practice. And so it's not just a community of people in one location, but it is a community of people living together and opening their doors to society to come and join them. And so we work together to practice and share the teachings with the greater community and whoever would like to come. And in monasteries, our common areas are attractive and inspiring, while the monastic quarters are modest and simple. One thing that came up at our full ordination last year was this phrase of making the familiar unfamiliar and the unfamiliar familiar. Venerable asked us, what is the point of coming to the monastery if we don't want to change? Our lifestyle involves subduing our self-centered mind. And so I am curious how people work with this phrase, the making the familiar unfamiliar and the unfamiliar familiar, and how that resonates in your practice.
So this is a complex question, I think, and could speak the whole time just on this. But basically, after learning the Buddhist worldview and then getting some understanding of mindfulness and introspective awareness, then watching my mind, where it is going, that is so habitual, that is familiar, that brings negative results, versus with intention, trying to move my mind to something that is unfamiliar and battling with the self-centered attitude that really doesn't want me to go there. So it's kind of that play between those two things, I think, for me.
Yeah, thank you. really noticing how our habitual mind gets us into trouble and creates a lot of misery, and applying the Buddhist teachings to actually create a lot more like freedom and space, but that it's really difficult because we're so habituated to these normal patterns. Yeah, Venerable Chuni.
It is a complex question. But I was thinking all the way back to the, and Venerable has told this story before, maybe in this section, about how when she first established the Abbey and Ananda was just the house, and how lay guests, me included, would come in and see a house. She was already seeing a monastery. And her training was to help us understand what that meant, right? So it's not so much getting familiar or unfamiliar with the place, or, now we have this big, beautiful Buddha hall. It looks a whole lot more like a monastery than it did 20 years ago. But at the same time, we can still come in and not realize that we don't see the monastery. We don't have the internal vision of what the monastery is. We don't have the internal vision of what the Sangha is. We aspire to become Sangha, but we don't know anything about what Sangha is. So the training that's required, and that you really get that in the full ordination, is this not just getting familiar with, it's a huge internal shift in understanding what a monastery is, what the purpose of a monastery is, why we have a monastery, why we're asked to behave in a certain way, what we're expected to behave in a certain way, how come walking this way is different from walking that way. I mean, it's actually a total internal transformation to become familiar with something different. But we don't even know what the something different is. So that's why we have to train as monastics. Right? We just don't walk in the door, change clothes, and that's it. And it's a lifetime training. You can see that with the senior nuns from Luminary, right? I mean, it's obvious to me. Okay, I've been here a long time, but they've been at it a way long time. And it's just continually deepening and deepening, deepening in the life of a Dharma internally, so that the external has a presentation that is Sangha. Yeah, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And how in the early days of the Abbey, you all had this one model of Venerable Chodron. And so how fortunate we are as the Abbey has grown that there are more seniors here, so that as the younger monastics have come, we've had kind of like multiple examples of looking at that process of integration. So it's, and I also hear this process of kind of where like the rules and the guidelines, it shifts from something kind of being imposed, like why are there all these ways that I have to do things, to like I actually want to show up this way because this is a reflection of my commitment to ethical conduct, to internalizing like this is the purpose of my life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to know why. Why are we aiming in this direction?
What you just talked about, Venerable Choni, reminded me of how that was at first. And my mind, here's how clueless I was. I would go into Ananda and it's like, why don't they have chairs? I just want to sit down. Can't I just sit down somewhere? Why the heck, And then, so what did we start to do? Lay down on the floor. Oh my gosh, when she came in, oh, you don't do that. But, so she, at the get-go, she, like you said, she had the vision. I had no vision. I had no vision at all. It was so interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was on this superficial thing. Give me a chair, will you? Why'd you take the couch out? Yeah.
I had a similar experience at the full ordination. There was no chairs in the lobby. There was one stool I noticed had appeared where some of the volunteers had come, and they tucked their stool under the table when they left. And so, of course, I took the stool out and sat down to drink my water, tucked it back in, and yeah, but there wasn't many chairs. You're standing or standing, yeah. Venerable Rinchen?
So I've given a whole BBC on this, so I'll not go through the specifics, but I see that there's a meta level in a way, where now when I see that I am doing things in ways that are very habitual for me, where I'm like, oh, I recognize this thought. I've been thinking thoughts like this since before I ordained. Oh, look at how I nest in my office. Like, whatever it is, there's these lists of things that I see, oh, this is an old habit. And then there's a thought of, I should probably work on changing that because that's probably not so monastic. And not necessarily then coming with it some resentment of, but this is who I am. This is how I'm comfortable. That is really diminishing. And instead it's, okay, let me find some time. I can't fix everything right away, but that notion of, okay, this is something I'm going to work on slowly and try to transform my mind. So I see that kind of clinging to individuality in the way that I've done things, like that in itself is decreasing.
Thank you. Venerable Pelge.
I think also this thing about being unfamiliar with identities, getting rid of your old identity as you come into the Sangha, your own habits, your own thoughts of who you think you are. And you come here, you got to change the whole worldview. So I think that's something that's big.
And like how both of you were sharing, like it's like this process. Like it's not like the familiar becomes unfamiliar overnight. It's this very much like ongoing process. Yeah, Venerable Momsal.
Trying to make more familiar, just knowing that each moment I have a choice about where the next thought is going. That's very unfamiliar, but incredibly powerful and empowering, rather. But that's one direction I'm trying to steer my mind, kind of based on what Venerable Jigme was saying, of having that mindfulness and introspective awareness. But it's like, wait, I don't have to just be carried away by this flow that I'm very habituated to. I can keep redirecting.
Venerable Nawang.
Talking about BBCs, I did a BBC on what a monastery is not. And I was just looking at some of these things. Some of them we've already covered. So it's not a family home. So not to relate, in that way. But it's also not a restaurant, So the way we relate to food is different, or we aspire to make it different. I'm still aspiring to work on that. But just like having the contemplations before we eat and then eating half the meal in silence, or eating the whole meal in silence, that's very different from my normal way of relating to food. And then in terms of school, how it's not a school, even though we're in class right now, and we have a media room that looks a lot like a college lecture hall, but to come at it in a different way, that, not to compete with my peers, although I have a tendency to do that, but to rejoice in others. And we're not getting grades, but we're really trying to work on our mind. It's not about just regurgitating information, but applying it to our life. Not a workplace, in that there's so much, with all of these different ways in which we relate to each other, it come with a lot of cultural baggage, I think. Many of us have worked in workplaces, so there's a certain culture about how we work. And so to not make offering service back to the job. Just relating to all of our activities in a very different way from how I used to relate to them.
Yeah, it's quite amazing that we have the Buddha's teachings to help us in how are we guiding our mind and how are we shifting our thoughts in this internal attitude because we have this vast goal of liberation and full awakening. It's like it's shifted from, the house and the career and the fancy car or whatever it was, and we're going for this much bigger aspiration. We can see just from all the sharing of this incredible value, like we all kind of, we wear the same clothes, we have the same haircut, but in our heart, it's this this real shift in where our priorities are, and that we get to share that with the greater community and inspire, ourselves in the community, and then those who want to come and practice with us is quite a rare and precious gift. Next slide. It's nice to be able to give this talk today because we just recited the Pratimoksha Sutra earlier. And it's also in this chapter here, the dedication from the Pratimoksha Sutra. The Buddha's appearance in the world is to be widely celebrated. Listening to the Dharma and practicing it accordingly is the surest cause for peace. The harmony of the assembly is the surest factor for nirvana. Liberating sentient beings from suffering is the utmost happiness. And the Buddha gave us these precepts and teachings as a guide for what to practice, what to adopt, and what to abandon. And the Sangha is a model for ethical behavior so the rest of society can have faith in the goodness and potential of human beings and be inspired to also live ethically. And the Buddha intended for the Sangha to live together to do this, like trees in a forest. I think we've probably all heard this example illustrated, but it's so beautiful how we can see this in nature. When trees are together in a forest, they grow upright, in this same direction, and are protected from the weather. When the intense wind comes through, like we've just had recently, they protect each other. Whereas the trees in the meadow, sometimes they grow in these, all sorts of craggly directions and are at real danger of getting blown over in those strong winds and forceful weather. And so here we are supporting each other in our ethical conduct and our commitment to these aspirations. And so due to the kindness of the Buddha, we are able to learn the Dharma. Venerable Chodron asked the question, what would it take to train a disciple like me or like you? Not easy. I know from my own experience, my mind can be quite stubborn and pretty convinced that I'm right. And I've been going through however many eons, thinking in this way. And so how kind that the Buddha came to this world and taught in a way that eventually we were able to encounter these teachings and be open to them. And listening to the Dharma and practicing it accordingly is the surest cause for peace. This is pretty inspiring because we can see that we live in a world full of discord and tremendous violence. And peace is something that we each need to cultivate in our own mind. It is not something that anyone can do for us. It's not something that can come from a legislative body, but it is something that each of us needs to do the work on and cultivate. The harmony of the assembly is the surest factor for nirvana. So being part of the Sangha community, we have privileges and also responsibilities. We share the same values and goals. And when our old habituating mind gets caught up in quarreling and blaming, this is leading us in the opposite direction from nirvana. And liberating sentient beings from suffering is the utmost happiness. The Venerable joked here, she's like, what? I thought happiness was getting what I want. I think we've all thought that before, and probably still do sometimes. And she talked about the, kind of the boots on the ground, like that helping others in their Dharma practice takes work. Like it takes effort to, host people here and host our retreats and events, to keep the Abbey clean and, a space where we can welcome guests and, support each other in our practice. And then she reminded us of like, would we have even met the Dharma if others hadn't put that work in to make the Dharma available for us? So if it weren't for the efforts of others, we likely wouldn't be in this room right now. And so how amazing that we have the opportunity to help create those conditions to support others in their practice, even when it might, I don't want to say it feels like work, but it takes effort and energy, and those things are sometimes in limited supply, but quite amazing that it all gets to go in this direction towards liberating sentient beings from suffering. There's not really a better thing to do. All right, the next slide. So shifting to the intent and purpose of monastic life, the first paragraph of the section here reads, stable interest in becoming a monastic develops naturally from deep reflection on the foundational Buddhist teachings. Contemplating the Four Truths, especially impermanence and death, and the disadvantages of samsara, we develop the aspiration to be free from samsara. As a result of reflecting on compassion and dependent arising, we become interested in the nature of the mind, which leads to an appreciation of emptiness. This leads to an understanding of rebirth, and then to the possibility of achieving liberation. When one is convinced of this possibility, one will naturally be drawn to living a life according to ethical precepts, which could lead to requesting ordination as a monastic. Venerable really emphasized that this stable interest develops naturally because we've learned the basic Buddhist philosophy, the Four Truths, and that our mind is the source of happiness and pain. And to really want to become a monastic, there has to be this stable interest. It's not just because those robes look really cool, these are really nice people, the food is good. It is this understanding the truth of the Buddha's teachings and that our mind is a mess. And sometimes people can come and then have this thought of like, oh my gosh, should I ordain? I don't know, maybe I should. And this kind of, she described it as this like civil war starts inside of them because they want to think about this possibility, but they also like to go to the movies and hang out with friends, and they're really invested in their career, and they really like their fancy clothes, their relationship, but also, but maybe I should ordain. Maybe I should be a monastic. And so she really advises that, we really want to just come back to contemplating the teachings. And if they make sense to us, it becomes something that we want to do. It's not something we are like pressuring ourselves into like, I should do this. And that if a person is going back and forth, should I or shouldn't I, Venerable advises us to drop it. The important thing is not whether we ordain. The important thing is that we practice. And when the mind is going around and around, we're not practicing. So just put that question aside, set up a daily practice, attend teachings regularly, and this is what we want to prioritize. This is where we're going to purify negativity and cultivate virtue. And so if there's this big decision that we have to make, or that we are contemplating, if we're confused, pause on making that decision. Put it on the back burner, do your practice, and the choice will become clear. Venerable Chuni, I see you smiling big. Would you like to share something?
more, my question is, who didn't hear that advice many, many times and actually couldn't take it? I mean, you have to wrestle with the wrestling until you realize that you no longer have to wrestle with the wrestling, I think. I may be totally wrong, but it might be an interesting survey to say, okay, who realized they were going back and forth, and then Venerable said, it will allow itself naturally, and you just stop worrying about it. Raise your hand.
Putting it on the back burner is easier said than done.
Yes, that's my point.
And, Venerable Jigme, did you have something you want to add? Yeah.
When I think back on how it was when I first got interested, and then, I had this understanding that if I kept going, I wouldn't be able to back out very easily, So, because it really grabbed me, but yet I had all those things of wanting to do this and that and whatever, and complicated life. But the interesting thing is, by practicing, then the practice itself starts clearing away all that junk. And at a certain point, then it isn't a question anymore. So it's kind of like, let me just stick with it. And then the results will come. And that's the beauty of this process, because everybody is so different. Yet if you just do that, no matter what your mind is like, or habits, or background, or whatever, you will get to the place where you see the beauty of this, and it transforms you. And who would walk away from that? You wouldn't. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, she talked about how when we are really reflecting deeply on the teachings and applying them to our life, this is where our motivation really starts to develop. And that if we aren't applying the teachings to our life, we're just kind of going through this like intellectual exercise where we're accumulating a lot of knowledge, but we're not really looking at our mind and how our mind is working. And that if we become interested in changing, we need to know why, and what do we want to change, and who do we want to become. And if we don't want to change, we just keep doing what we're doing. And so she went on to invite us to contemplate that how developing compassion is going to make us interested in the nature of the mind, and an appreciation of emptiness, and how reflecting on dependent arising does this as well. And that when one is convinced at the possibility of liberation, that we can change, that our mind has this potential to change and transform, and there is a method to do this, then we will naturally be drawn to living an ethical life. And this is how our aspiration for ordination arises in this natural way as a result of our practice. And when we're drawn to living an ethical life, we then naturally want to take precepts. I'd say this is, for our, if we are wanting to stay, in the lay community or wanting to ordain, this is a very natural progression, is, seeing the value of ethical life, of living an ethical life. We want to make this commitment to living in accord with our values. And if our attachment and anger are bringing us pleasure, it won't be our thing. But when we see that these things actually drive us buggy, our precepts make a lot of sense. And Venerable went on to describe that robes are just a piece of cloth. And wearing this piece of cloth does not mean that we are purifying our mind. And this is why we need to study, think about the teachings, and practice. And like was described, this is an ongoing process. The external change is much quicker than that internal change. And that the Buddha's ethical restraint and monastic lifestyle were these expressions of the purity of his mind. And so as we are cultivating our ethical conduct and living in community, we have this amazing opportunity to do this every day, to act in consideration of others, to see where is it that I'm putting me first, and have this opportunity to reflect on that. We are also cultivating this mind like the Buddha that is just this, natural reflection of ethical conduct and integrity and consideration for others. And the Buddha explained the development of the motivation to ordain when he said, "Monastics, here a clansman goes forth out of faith from the home life into homelessness, considering, I am a victim of birth, aging, and death, of sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. I am a victim of suffering, a prey to suffering. Surely an ending of this whole mass of dukkha can be known." And so we're not just looking at our problems and interpersonal difficulties in this life. To ordain, we need at least that motivation of renunciation to get out of samsara, this cycling through of birth, aging, sickness, and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And we see that this is pretty much what we're doing life after life. We are in this situation with no end and no beginning. It's not just that we have problems in this life, it's that wherever we're reborn in samsara, we're not going to find any peace. And so the Buddha said, I am a victim. And so what is it that victimizes us? Our karma and afflictions, the three poisons. And as we deepen our study and reflection, we gain some confidence that that the ignorance is the root cause of this, and is this erroneous way of seeing things, this erroneous consciousness that misperceives stuff. But since it's erroneous, since it's this error that we're perceiving all the time, we gain confidence that we can develop the wisdom to see things as they are. And this root of samsara, the ignorance, can be abolished. And so as we develop our understanding of this, we may be inspired to become a monastic and really devote our life to this purpose. Because we need to eliminate the afflictions. And we do that, the only way to do that is with wisdom. And to cultivate our wisdom, we need concentration. Mindfulness and introspective alertness are key mental factors that are required to really keep our mind concentrated, as Venerable Chodron was talking about yesterday. And to develop mindfulness and introspective alertness, can't really start with meditation. Maybe some people can after multiple lives of practice. It might come easily to them. But I know for myself and maybe others in the room, we need to practice by being mindful of our actions of body and speech. Am I living in accord with my precepts and values? Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? And as we are developing awareness of this, we are developing the qualities we need to develop concentration. And from there, we can really cultivate the wisdom to get out of this mess. So as we ordain as a monastic, this change in our outer appearance should really reflect this inner change that we have been describing, and this shift in our priorities of really this vast goal that's not focused really on this life and the happiness of this life. But Venerable reminds us to change the mind and progress along the path takes a lot of time, effort, and work. The outer change is relatively easy. And if we put the work in and are a monastic for a long time, we can see the change within ourselves. And we can see this in senior monastics, how they act and live their lives. They give us faith that the Dharma actually works. And then His Holiness and Venerable ended this section by saying that, actually it's in the middle of the section, that keeping monastic precepts for a long time is of great benefit. It enables people to gain strong conviction in the efficacy of the 3 higher trainings and habituate themselves to them over time. In their future lives, they will encounter conducive circumstances and will be able to continue practicing as a monastic. In this way, awakening will be attained more swiftly because they are habituated to releasing attachment to samsara and to practicing the path. So that's quite inspiring, that what we are doing right now, no matter what is going on in our life, when we are really working to release our attachment and habituate ourselves to the Buddhist teachings, that is going to play out in future lives too. We're going to be able to meet with this path and be connected with it more easily than if we are doing other things in our life and just nurturing our attachment. Instead, we are pushing back against it with these incredible instructions we're given by the Buddha and our teachers. Next slide. So going into maintaining the purity of the Sangha. In the Sutra on the Fruits of the Homeless Life, the Buddha describes how one becomes a monastic and then lives as one. And having gone forth from the householder life to the homeless life of a monastic, he dwells restrained by the restraint of the precepts, persisting in right behavior, seeing danger in the slightest faults, observing the commitments he has taken regarding body, deed, and word, devoted to the skilled and purified life, perfected in ethical conduct, with the sense doors guarded, skilled in mindful awareness and content. And so Venerable unpacked these different qualities. And so cultivating restraint, in that we all have precepts which are more difficult for us to keep. And these are the ones where we should really have our eye on. And Venerable Master Benyon, in his teachings on the precepts, said something like, which is the precept that will lead to our liberation? It's the one that is hardest for us to keep. And so to be really aware of what are these difficult precepts for us, and how can we really guard the mind when we are in situations where we can potentially transgress them. And this seeing danger in the slightest faults, Venerable said, yes, do see the danger in the slightest faults, but also don't let the mind get so tight and paranoid and crazy about it, to keep balanced in our practice. The skilled and purified life and purified ethical conduct. We are not here yet. This is what we're training to cultivate. And so we don't want to beat ourselves up over where we are not, but we also don't want to use that as an excuse to justify our bad behavior. Guarding the sense doors. This is how we keep our precepts. What am I looking at? What am I smelling? What am I tasting? What am I touching? What am I thinking about? What is going through my mind? Kind of how you were talking about this shift from the, what we're familiar with is, very much nurturing the afflictions in our minds. And what is unfamiliar that we're making more familiar is this being aware of what are we thinking and applying the antidotes. Practicing this when we're not super wrapped up in the affliction, so that when they do come up, we really have these tools and are practiced in using them to, have that choice over what is my next thought. Being content. Even though we cannot do everything perfectly, we can rejoice that we are monastics. This is an incredible lifestyle and opportunity, and we are practicing in the same way that the Buddha did. And so we can be content that we are putting our life energy in a good direction, no matter what problems arise. Next slide. And then the Buddha went on to describe the 4 ways of using offerings. When we receive offerings, we live completely on the kindness of others. And so it's so important that after we ordain, we practice sincerely, because our faithful friends and the Buddha's disciples offer requisites to people who practice well. And so if we're not practicing well, but we are enjoying the requisites, we are stealing from those who do practice well. And monastics who do their best to practice well, but forget to dedicate for the welfare of all their donors, are enjoying offerings with debt. And so it's so wonderful that Venerable has set up this schedule where we dedicate for our donors every day after lunch. And we dedicate in our twice monthly sok. We read the names of all of our donors and really think about that incredible kindness and dedicate for their benefit. And then the enjoyment of inheritance. This is the Arya learners who are on their way to becoming arhats. And the enjoyment as an owner are arhats, since they have eliminated all the pollutants and fulfilled the aim of the path. The offerings are theirs to use. And so during this teaching, it came up that there's this pretty big gap between number 2 and number 3. And I see this as really this encouragement to remember the kindness of our donors and to remember how important it is to dedicate for their benefit. And so we recite these prayers every day after lunch. And I can find that myself, what happens sometimes is, my mind is on automatic. Venerable Chodron yesterday was talking about the sports commentator, the parade announcer, and I really could resonate with that. And all of a sudden, I noticed by the end, we're done with lunch prayers. And so I'm curious how you all work with this, these really important things that we do every day. How do you stay really present with what we are saying? Yeah, Venerable Supple.
In the last few months, there's been a shift for me. Actually, it happened during the Vinaya course. I sat across from a nun who was so mindful during her meal that it really impressed me. And so I just found myself naturally mimicking her, like how she was holding her bowl and how she was holding her spoon and how, not eating like an ant, going that slowly, but just watching how mindful she was. And so we talked about it for a while. And so from that point, I just started paying more attention to everything in the bowl, and not on autopilot, but really thinking about the kindness of people who have produced that food. And, letting that be my lunchtime, when we were in silence, letting that be where my mind goes during lunch. And my gosh, it just spreads out to thousands and thousands of people. And so when I think about it in that way, then naturally I want to repay their kindness. It just naturally comes up. So then I want to do those prayers. I want to stay present because these people have been so kind to me. So it shifted for me from being more like an intellectual exercise to something that is more heartfelt now, and I enjoy doing it.
Great, thank you. Venerable Jigme.
I do 2 different things. One is when I notice that I'm not engaged, checked out a bit, or it's just rote, then I remind myself that I could fall down dead right now. And that awakens me a bit. So then I focus. The other one is before the prayers start, I ask myself, what is being said? What is being chanted? What do I know about this? How can I bring this in? So to kind of make it alive instead of just some rote thing. When I'm practicing on my own and I do that checkout thing with some of the parts in the sadhana, I make myself go and do it again so that I am with it. So.
Thanks. Venerable Sampton?
I've been plagued with the mind that is distracted by whether the chanting is in tune or not for decades, and that is really unfruitful. And I've reached the point, you have to get sick of something, so sick of it, you sort of hit bottom. And so I think I've hit bottom. Not that the chanting is that bad, but just my critical mind judging, are we in tune, are we together, all of that. And the words that we're saying are so rich in meaning. And so that's where I'm putting my focus now. I do get drawn away from it every now and then with the pitch or whatever it is, but that's what I do.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Venerable Pomo.
One thing that helps, which is a bit banal maybe, but it's knowing what you're saying, because it's in a language that I speak. And the other thing is that I'm pretty new here, and I don't know so many of the people who do make offerings, and I think, oh, I wish I got to know them. So I hope I will get to know them, but it makes me think, oh, there's all these people, they give me, among others, they don't even know me, I don't know them. I really wish to get to know them.
Thank you. Yeah, Venerable Deki.
The prayers where we say, may we never be parted from the Dharma in any of our lives, I use that as kind of a cue to just, again, think that all of us could die today. And especially I think about when guests are leaving, of just being aware of, may they stay connected to the Dharma, and just really kind of, I use that as a check-in to come back to, impermanence and making that strong aspiration. May we never be parted from the Dharma.
Venerable Rinchen.
It's interesting. I have kind of the opposite experience now of Venerable Pomo, where being involved with now the thanking, I had the experience the last sok of, the names I was reading, feeling like I knew each one of those people. I hadn't met many of them, but I recognized their names. And so sending out thanking emails where I say, oh, we dedicate for you every day, that then pulls me back in more to the prayer. So having that deeper connection, not necessarily personally, but just in a more familiar way with our kind supporters, is helping make that more real for me.
Yeah, Venerable Poge.
One thing that helps me when I'm checked out is I recall a situation whereby I told this to Tracy too, and one day she came out and her car was stuck down the road and she was bringing all our food offering, and we were like trying to get everything out, that kind of kindness that really touched me at that moment. And it was dark, cold, and she just, with a big smile, she just bring everything out. I was like, I need to dedicate.
It's beautiful. All these different ways, like our personalities and kind of what, grabs us is so different. And so it's so nice to share these different ways that we are really staying connected or working to stay connected with these really important, beautiful dedication prayers and other prayers that we say every day. Yeah, Venerable Nawang.
One phrase that I bring to mind often when I'm in the lunch line is from others, for others. So I think that we've received this food from others, so let me practice for others. I don't always remember it, but when I do, it's just this point of check-in and refreshing the motivation. And then also in terms of, not with dedication prayers, but with other prayers we do on a daily basis, like refuge and bodhicitta prayers, is really stopping and doing analytical meditation on the meaning of the prayers so that it's not just words. And when I find it's just words, to really pause. And we can do that, especially now in retreat and when we're doing our practices on our own, to really make it alive.
Yeah, and Venerable Chuni.
Try to think if I have this with all of our prayers. I don't, but for some of our prayers, I have visualizations that I also do, like doing the taras in the morning. It's easy to check out on those, But having learning what their colors are, what their specialty is, those kinds of things, bringing that to mind as we recite each name, or food offering. Actually, imagining
not just giving to the Buddhists, but giving it to everybody in the world, so we all in the planet are offering together, so we all get the merit, so we all get to eat. I mean, that one comes pretty automatically anymore. And that really helps. If I can get a visualization going on any of these, then it helps me stay engaged a lot.
Yeah, how to keep the mind engaged in a way that is like stimulating, so it kind of like takes precedence over the commentator. Okay, next slide. Continuing on with the purity of the Sangha, Atisha gave us some very valuable advice, because when one person messes up, this spreads around the lay and monastic community, and people tend to put all monastics in this category of the one who messed up. And so they generalize the whole Sangha based on the behavior of a few bad apples. And so monastics behaving badly harms the entire Sangha as lay disciples lose faith. And so it's very important that we keep our precepts well and really are cultivating these internal qualities like humility and authentic self-confidence. And so we don't demand and expect respect simply because we're a monastic. We don't hold ourselves above others, but we make ourselves into objects worthy of respect by being humble and keeping our commitment to the Buddha when we took precepts. And so the first verse starts off, "For those holding monastic ordination, the big trap lies in receiving material gifts and social respect." The big trap, Venerable Chodron says, the thing that brings us down is not being hungry, but it's when we have so much that we don't appreciate it and we get kind of haughty. We become very attached and habituated to receiving material gifts and social respect. We might get an attitude like, lay people get me whatever I ask for. They call me by a respectful name and treat me so much better than when I was a lay person. Why do they do this? We forget it's because we represent the Dharma, and we think, I am superior. This is poison, Venerable tells us. Haughtiness and arrogance are displayed when we don't have real self-confidence. Because people who are sincerely humble, not this like kind of fake humble, like always groveling, like, oh no, I'm so not good at that, I'm so not good at that, but this just very calm, centered, balanced humility, these folks are nice to be around, and there's no trips. And with real self-confidence, we can talk about our faults. They're the people who we feel comfortable approaching to give feedback because we know we can have a conversation with them and it's not just going to end badly. And when we don't have this real self-confidence, we are seeking praise and this exterior validation to boost ourselves. And so we start acting in superior ways to attract this. And we get it, and we get addicted to it. And then we stop realizing that we're acting in this way. And people develop concepts about the Dharma based on the behavior of monastics. And so when they see us acting poorly, they are going to lose faith in the Buddhist teachings. And so to prevent this, Venerable encourages us to get our act together, and that our behavior as a monastic should not be an act. We should be a good example, but we shouldn't be trying to be a good example, not contriving this behavior to, do things that we wouldn't normally do, but because we want to be a good example. Because then we are fake, and we're doing things, again, looking for respect and regard, and we will never get enough of this. We are then, our attachment is poked, rewarded. The little button is pushed, and we just can continue in this way. And so Atisha continued, avoid attachment to such things. Those free from materialistic grasping are a source of delight to the wise, like a lotus blossoming in fire. And so thinking of this image, a lotus blossoming in fire, like it sounds quite rare. Like when when there's a fire going through, like the lotus probably isn't blossoming in the pond. And so here we are, monastics practicing in this world full of non-virtue. We're like this lotus bud trying to blossom in this, surrounded by the fire of the afflictions all around us. And we blossom by being free from materialistic grasping and attachment to praise, honor, and respect. And this trap is that we don't know how to evaluate our own actions and mental states. So we just keep looking outside for other people to tell us who we are and if we're behaving well or not. And we've been really habituated to this. This is what our parents did when they told us, you're being a good girl, you're being a good boy. This is what our teachers did with, when we got a good report card, we got a bad report card. It's other people, telling us whether we're doing well or not. And so as monastics, we're really trying to learn how to evaluate ourselves, give ourselves credit where it's due when we know we have a good motivation, and also to know that when we are getting praise and we had a rotten motivation, that actually, we still need to do some purification and adjust our motivation. That outward reputation isn't what the end goal is. It is purifying our mind and subduing our afflictions. And it can be hard to be honest with ourselves. But when we do this, we aren't avoiding others, we aren't avoiding criticism, and we aren't avoiding feedback. But it takes courage to admit kind of our hypocritical tendencies of, I'll speak for myself, I can judge others for these things that I don't like in them, and then I turn around and I do the same thing myself. But it's because, I see these qualities that I don't like in myself, I see them very easily in others. And so it's this process of really this self-reflection, seeing that irritation is, coming from my own mind and a reflection of where I need to grow. And the next verse starts out, ordained practitioners have a special responsibility in preserving the holy Dharma. And so there's the transmitted Dharma, which are the teachings the Buddha gave, and the realized Dharma that we actually realize, this consciousness that arises, that is the realization. And we need the transmitted Dharma, we need to receive these teachings to actualize the realized Dharma. And this is our special responsibility. This is how we're going to pass the Dharma on. And when we have realizations, we can guide others very well. And there is a difference when we hear Dharma from those who have realizations and the rest of us. And the realizations are hard to cultivate, but we are working towards that as we're listening to teachings and reflecting on them and bringing the Dharma into our daily life. And Atisha continues, they should live in the 4 higher ways, such as moderation and so forth, should have few needs, and learn to be content with a simple life. So in moderation, we don't need the best quality, the most recent model cell phone, the most expensive shoes. With a few needs, this goes along with moderation. And we can really reflect, do I need this or do I want this? What's more accurate? And learning to be content with a simple life. This is difficult in our materialistic world and the way that many of us grew up. But an important purpose of monastic life is to reduce attachment. And for that, it's essential that monastics live simply. One should live with few possessions and dwell with one's back turned to the things that cause grasping. So the things that we are grasping at and craving, turn the mind away from these things. They cause us to just want more of them, and there is never an end to this craving. I see this just with little things like ice cream. I don't really, I don't think like at lunch, like, oh, I hope we have ice cream today. But if it's there, then I start thinking, oh, now I do want some ice cream. And then I go and I have a scoop of ice cream. And maybe this is just me, but one scoop is never enough. I mean, I'm so glad to live with all you people because I can't just be like the big pig, and eat the whole container because then I look bad. Being part of the community helps me with, moderation. But just seeing like there's no end to this, I just want more and more. There's not that satiation I think there will be if I just have one thing that I am attached to. That'll just be it. No, I keep trying, but there's never that I've had enough. So to, really be aware of these things where the craving arises. Sometimes I actually forego the ice cream because I know this happens. And it's like, fine. It's amazing. So if that happens with ice cream, that can probably happen with our bigger attachments as well. And so we can come into monastic life with really good motivations, and the afflictions act like a burglar and steal these away, and instead we can get attached to reputations, offerings, renown, and respect. And so to keep coming back to what our original aspirations were. And Venerable asks us to think about how many lifetimes have we had a precious human life and really self-sabotaged it in this way, chasing after objects of attachment, disrobing, becoming smug, arrogant, and complacent. And so to work on this, her and His Holiness encourage us to reflect on the kindness of others and the disadvantages of self-centeredness. And so on the next slide are these reflections for monastics, these 10 reflections that she mentioned that really aim at an honest evaluation of how to improve in our practice. And which is there a reflection here that stands out for you in something that is really fruitful and supportive in your practice? Yeah, Venerable Supple.
They're all good, but the one that really helps my mind is the one about karma. I'm the owner of my karma, heir of my karma. I have karma as my origin, my relative, my resort. I will be the heir of whatever karma, good or bad, that I do. Calls me up every time.
Yeah, that when we can really connect with what our motivation is and think that we'll experience the results of our actions. It's quite a powerful way to check up and see if we really want to do this.
So when I first came here, and I was kind of shocked how stubborn I was and how right I was and how what people were saying was, baloney. That's what my mind was saying. And then I started to feel the misery of that, which was helpful. And so then I had to figure out how to not have the misery and still stay here. And so then I had to somehow open a little bit. And I think the purification practices, that's why I love Vajrasattva so much, because it gave some space in my mind to actually consider doing it a little different. Because out in the world before I came here, I had my ideas and my views, and I was right, and don't mess with me. Period, end of story. And so coming here, it's like the first few weeks I was here, it was like, how come no one listens to me? No one, I was talking and no one was listening, like, oh, that's a good idea or whatever. I was just ignored. And then I had to do the thing of, well, there are no enemies here. That was my next thing I had to do. So I would stay here, you know. So it's so interesting. So now I think the one that is probably the best is, do my wise companions in the spiritual life find fault with my conduct? That's the hardest one, and you know, it maybe only goes as far as some people in the community, and then of course Venerable Chodron, but mostly Venerable Chodron. And I'm at the place now when she says something that is, yeah, I listen. And I don't like it, but I listen. So, and that has helped me a ton, I think.
Yeah, it's really something to be able to hear about our faults and how we need to change from others and see how the mind responds to that, because we're all here in this community. Like in the outer world, someone tells me that I'm not wonderful, there's a lot of ways to avoid that person. But here, we're all together and no one's going anywhere. And so how to learn to actually appreciate that feedback, because someone is seeing something that I am not. And they're actually really trying to help me, even if they're afflicted when they say it. Yeah, did you have something to add, Venerable Lama? Yeah.
The one that stands out to me is, I must part and be separated from everyone and everything dear and agreeable to me. So it reminds me of the last 3 points of the 9-point death meditation, that we can't take material possessions, we can't take friends and family, and we can't take our body with us at the time of death. And I'm really working on attachment to these things, and just to see that by living in this lifestyle, it's really protecting me from devoting my entire life to these 3, instead of reminding myself that I have to leave all of these. What am I doing? And Venerable has given me some very pointed advice to think about, like being in the coffin, and is this thing really going to serve you like you think it will? And I'm still working on that. From that advice, because my mind is so obscured, seeing these things as so real, and the appearance of this life being so strong. But I see this as the medicine that I need to just keep taking, because it's true. I can't deny it.
Yeah, thank you. So I loved these reflections when we went through this chapter, and it's been very nice to come back to them. And I encourage all of us to keep these handy. Next verse, next slide. So in Advice to Monastics, Venerable Chodron and His Holiness encouraged us to come back to some of these verses from the ordination ceremony. And we went through the first one in the motivation this evening. And the next one, guard integrity and aspiration, cut the bonds of family and kin, leave your worldly home to practice the Dharma, aspire to lead all beings to full awakening. And our integrity is so important, this sense of what is ethical and what isn't. What do I feel good about doing, and what do I not feel good about doing, regardless of what others say? Because at the end of the day, we have to live with ourselves. We know that, when we have a good motivation or when we don't, and when we're acting in accordance with our values or when we're not. And when we're not acting in accord with our values, we will perhaps find ourselves lying to cover up what we did, because we are afraid of being judged, or having a bad reputation, or some other worldly disadvantage that comes when we're honest about our bad behavior. And there's the quote from Posada that we all recited today: confession and repentance bring peace and happiness, and concealment brings sorrow. This incredible a ceremony that we do every couple of weeks where we bring forth the transgressions in our precepts and are really honest with each other about, what we are doing. And that it's just, sometimes the things that I don't want to confess the most, it's like the biggest load gets released when I do, and it can just be received with a lot of compassion and understanding. I think as other people are like, I've done that too. Because we all live with the same afflictions, and when we can be honest, when they get the better of us, it's a really, really powerful and quite incredible to be in a group that can hold that with compassion. And so, guarding aspiration, Venerable encourages us to really keep this aspiration to stay ordained for the rest of our life, and to keep our ordination well, to keep our precepts well. And to do this happily, knowing that this is something worthwhile to do. And that we are taught to make these huge aspirations. We are going to liberate all sentient beings and lead all sentient beings to full awakening. And so this is wonderful, but just don't put a timeline on these aspirations. But be happy and content to create the causes. And this way, we just will go step by step in a joyful way, compared to I will reach stream entry in 10 years. This is that checklist mind that will make us very miserable. And so when we have these amazing aspirations, we can feel good about our life because we're working in this direction. And many people don't have this goal, this something that they really are working towards that is of such great benefit. And so cutting the bonds of family and kin. This does not literally mean I am no longer your family and your daughter and your sister anymore. But what it is we are cutting that attachment. We're working to cut that attachment and really cultivate this unconditional love and acceptance and compassion for our family members. Not just I love you when you treat me how I want to be treated. I love you when you give me gifts. I love you when you tell me I'm special. But this, I love you regardless of, everything that you are. I love you because you have a good heart. And I love you despite all of your afflictions and flaws. You are a kind, sentient being. And we don't need to get in this kind of sticky family dramas and gossip. But the more we can decrease our attachment, actually, the more we can share wise advice with our family members, because we're not so stuck in and involved in the dramas that they are, that happen in our families. And so aspire to lead all beings to full awakening. This aspiration might be impractical, but that's not a problem. We are still aspiring for it, and we're going in that direction. And when we have this aspiration right here in the ordination ceremony, this is why we are doing what we are doing. This is a wonderful and exciting project. And to lead others to liberation, we need to first develop ourselves. And so that's our daily work. And so the next verse, go forth to enter the path, cut off bonds, and bid family farewell. Now you are imbued with the precepts. Resolve to cut non-virtue and cultivate compassion. Renounce illusion, return to the truth. How happy is the door to liberation. And so we are going forth from the home life to the homeless life, cutting off these bonds of attachment to family and kin, not literally cutting our relationships, but just this attachment in our mind. Now you are imbued with the precepts. Venerable described how joyful she is each time she gives the precepts. And during the full ordination, when she was watching, there was this balcony above the assembly where we all were. She just was describing how she had these thoughts of it was during the novice ordination, because we retake the novice ordination before the bhikshuni ordination. And she was just just describing wow, I hope all you people realize how amazing this is. And to just, keep coming back to that, because sometimes we can get into our, kind of regular daily life, but to keep coming back to this incredible fortune that we have to have met this path and be so inspired to take and live with these precepts. And so what do we need to do next? Cut non-virtue and cultivate compassion. Renounce illusion and return to the truth. The truth is emptiness. And so we haven't had the realization of emptiness, but the nature of our mind lacks this inherent existence. And so we are returning, we're coming home to see the basic nature of our mind. We are renouncing the illusion, the way that we perceive things all around us, that our ignorance grasps at truly existence, that my attachment thinks is inherently amazing, that my anger thinks is inherently horrible. We are renouncing that illusion and returning to thinking about the nature of our mind. And how happy is the door to liberation? We found it. Amazing. And so Venerable encourages us to inspire for enlightenment in this life, but don't expect it. To aspire for it and also accept where we are. Because when we don't accept where we are, it doesn't actually change where we are. It just makes us miserable. So to have these vast aspirations and also this acceptance of where we are on the path. And His Holiness closed this section by saying, whether or not you are ordained, it would be beneficial to develop appreciation for the simplicity of a monastic life. Even if you are unable or do not want to be ordained in this life, appreciating the monastic way of life will leave an imprint so you can be ordained in future lives. The next slide. So I'll leave you with the joy of monastic discipline. And this is a poem some verses that His Holiness wrote in 1973 to express the respect he has for monastic discipline. How appropriate it is for those fortunate to follow you, the Buddha who taught great purity, to engage with minds of faith in pure conduct beyond reproach. Externally pure and also internally pure, this is the Buddhist tradition. It produces every temporary and ultimate benefit. How auspicious to meet with this medicine benefiting both self and others. This opportunity is found this once, is difficult to find again, and those who strive are so few. Make firm effort in your heart and apply yourself to pure conduct in 100 ways. Since without a doubt such a path can easily subdue the very coarse afflictions, why even mention freedom from the dukkha experienced in the householder's life? With discipline as the root, what cannot be produced from the mighty tree of the Mahayana path, bodhicitta and the union of serenity and insight? The extremely swift, ultimate secret path, the magnificent and praiseworthy method to transform strong poison into medicine, the foundation of this too is ethical restraint. Cherish this discipline, which is the cause of attaining swiftly, the inseparable union of emptiness and compassion, the state of Vajradhara. Therefore, O friends with intelligence, do not disparage or hold as trivial the Pratimoksha ethical code, which originates in the Sravaka's scriptures. Discipline is praised as the basis and root of the doctrine. One should strive to maintain it carefully by study and analysis, with mindfulness and introspective awareness. Guard it respectfully with conscientiousness and integrity. Do not be lazy or indifferent, lest you snap the root of lasting happiness. I have spoken these words with a thought to benefit, lest the purpose be diminished, by the kindness of the great Father Manjughosha and my kind and qualified spiritual mentors. This monk from Amdo, Tenzin Gyatso, has written this with heartfelt respect for these practices. Forsaking eloquence and composition, it was composed in a plain and simple style. By any merits it may have, may all mother sentient beings in general, and especially many intelligent young people from the land of snows, engage in the practice of this path and touch the ground of supreme awakening. May all good fortune increase. So that's a review of Chapter 5, the monastic Sangha, the monastic community, and the value and purpose of monastics in the world. Are there any final thoughts or comments? Great. Oh yeah, Venerable Supple.
There was a section in the middle where you were quoting His Holiness and Venerable's praising precepts in a way that made it, keeping precepts, I forget exactly what you said, but it sounded like keeping precepts was the most important thing that brings value and goodness to your life. And when you were talking about that section, I was thinking about yes and. Just keeping precepts on one's own is good. And what I think really brings that to life in oneself is living in community, that the two go hand in hand. And I do marvel that the Buddha was brilliant enough to invite his monastics to live together, because we do bump up against each other, and it is hard to fool yourself that you're farther along the path than you are when you have so many mirrors living around you, reminding you of where you are, which is a good thing, because then we can actually practice and stay honest in our practice. So I just thought to mention that.
Yeah, thank you. Agreed. Yeah, the Buddha did set up the monastic community to live together, and I think it's more challenging and more fruitful. If I go home by myself, sure, I'm not engaging in harsh speech or rudeness or anything because no one else is around. And at the same time, I don't have that opportunity to practice either and really, look at what is going on in my self-centered mind that wants what I want and wants people to get out of my way. Yeah, there's huge value to living in community. All right, let's dedicate.
Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of white Tara, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzing Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends. May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Fearless Supreme Spiritual Leader, Omniscient King of the Shakyas, Motherly Tara, Supreme Bestower of longevity and wisdom, vast ocean assembly of sources of refuge, grant propitiousness here and now for a nectar of benefit and bliss to flow. With a clear mind of extensive learning gained from following the wondrous traditions of Thubten, the able one's teachings, You bring clarity to masses of disciples with the light of children, the lamp of the Dharma. May your lotus feet remain unfaltering for a very long time. Through your dharmic deeds of hearing, thinking, meditating, and so on, place those who seek the liberated path in harmony through immaculate discipline. Please lead all beings to liberation with undeclining excellent qualities of scripture and insight, and establish them in a glory of eternal bliss. May the deeds of explaining and practicing the Dharma, done by groups supporting the teachings and their upholders, who spread the view of dependent arising and non-violent actions in the 10 directions, and especially at Sravasti Abbey in the West, flourish.